you, but I prefer to be doing this right now back by the beach, to be honest.
Oh,
just
stop it.
remotely by the beach.
I'm just imagine us like going to you live in Miami in the sunshine with the time difference and you like chilling in your sun lounger. I'd have been like, get him off, can't handle it. I'm glad your tan has faded, such is my envy.
Yeah, I don't think it's completely faded. I think it must be the light here. I don't know what it is, but it's still there. Trust me.
It's
just
still
a bit. Clinging on.
Amazing. Well, welcome to everyone tuning in, especially welcome if it's your first pour and sip. I'm Christy. This is Andy.
Nice to meet you all. Pleased to be back. How was Christy in my absence?
Yeah, I mean, please be kind. I flying solo. So if you're new, we co-host our live tastings, which is so much fun, and we have the best time. But Andy abandoned me to go to the sunshine, which in my view is just not okay.
Yeah, just like you abandoned me a couple of months ago to go to an award ceremony.
No, it's fine. It's all good. And we are back. It's the first Thursday in February, so it's our first tasting of the month, which is so exciting. We've got 3 drams to taste.
Yes. And we're not even going to Scotland today, are we?
That's a very good point. I feel like we have a very geographically diverse pour and sip this evening.
Yes, we really do. We're America, England, and Japan.
Yes.
Really exciting.
I feel like...
Anthony Mullinson saying, hi all, first time, please be gentle with me. Have to say, for all you people who are coming for your first time, yes, we will be gentle with you, obviously. This is not a quiz. It's just please get involved is the thing we'd say. Please get involved with your tasting notes, asking questions. There's no question that's too silly. If you think it's silly, still ask it anyway. There's no tasting note that's too silly. Please just let us know what you think of the whiskies and what are you getting from the whiskies. That's the most important thing. That's how we can be. We're a community here at Pour and Sip. So if it is your first time, please get involved. Everybody is really super friendly in the chat as well. And I'm sure the regulars will help you out. So
yes. 100%. So the whole ethos of Pour and Sip is that we basically share whiskey together. We have a conversation about it. We appreciate it together. We say what we like and, you know, the tasting notes, how we think about it. And very excitingly, for 2 of our 3 drams this evening, we have guests to interview as well. So yeah, we don't just want your tasting notes, which are wonderful. We appreciate them. We want your questions and your comments for our guests as well.
Yes, absolutely. Please do. Ian Thompson saying, hi, everyone. Chris Dagnan saying that you managed without me. So
I mean, I feel like we had a wonderful time without you, but I would say that I'm biased.
Absolutely.
I think as well. So for anyone who's like worried about some dram admin, if you're thinking, what am I tasting? What do I need to get ready? Here's the lowdown. Make sure you've got some water is what I would say for a palate cleansing in between. We're going to kick off with Hibiki Harmony, which is one of my all-time favorite Japanese whiskey. So myself and Andy can have a little chinwag about that. So yeah, the questions, comments, all of these things, keep them coming in. Then I'm going to scoot off and leave Andy in the very safe hands of Gergo from Four Roses, who is going to do a deep dive into American whiskey, bourbon, and I'm going to throw yeast strains out there as well.
Yes, that's
It's going to be excellent. And then last but not least, I am going to have a lovely chat with Chris from the Lakes Distillery, and we're going to talk about cask finishing, Moscatel, all these wonderful things. And yeah, I'm super excited. We've got 2 blends and the bourbon this evening, so it should be super. I mean, we can get geeky. We can get so geeky.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we intend to do. Mike Pizarro missed you, Andy, though Christy is always great. And Colin Bathgate, she was fab. Thumbs up. So there we go.
Well, we're very glad to have you back, Andy. We're so glad to have you back. It was not the same without you.
Okay, pleased to be back.
Pleased to be back. Excellent. And okay, here's the question for the evening while we're warming up. I want to know what people have drunk in the last couple of weeks. It was really exciting to them. Andy, what did you drink in Miami that blew your mind?
Like I said to you before, I drank like a very unusually low amount of whiskies when I was there, which was a real shame. Though when I was in a really nice restaurant, I tried some Weller Foolproof, which I hadn't ever, and that was some pretty lovely stuff. And then I also had a dram of which I can't believe I hadn't tried before because I love a corn whiskey, was the Balcones Baby Blue, which is a really weird and cool whiskey, I have to say. Like, it's just mad, but it's beautiful whiskey.
Yeah, I love Balcones Baby Blue. It's one of the first American whiskies I ever tasted, and I was like, this is so different to single malt Scotch. Like, it blew my mind. It's wonderful.
So yeah, they've got amazing stuff coming out. We've never had Balcones on here, have we? No.
I would not want to stake anything on it, because we may have done, but not that I can recall. So Balcones, if you're watching, get in touch for and sip. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, there's lots of exciting things happening actually with Texas whiskey. But anyway, we digress because we've got other whiskies to try tonight. And I see your comments are all coming in. Gergo saying that Balcones is amazing.
It is. Oh my gosh. I got to visit, just as a brief aside on Balcones, I got to visit them just pre-pandemic. It was one of my last few whiskey tastings before the world press paused. Yeah. And I think if anyone's ever in Texas, it's so worth a visit. Go and check them out. It's a gorgeous distillery, very, very cool. They're very like foodie, and their bar is fabulous.
Yes, absolutely. Joe F, I wonder how much pour and sip will drain my wallet this month. Your Uncle Banya, my full Harmony bottle arrived yesterday. Gotta love the members discount. Well,
oh my gosh, so organised to get one already.
Yes, I have to say that on that note, we're going to start talking about the Hibiki Harmony. I have to say though that this dram deserves the bottle to be shown to all of you guys because it is one of the most stunning bottle designs.
Do you have a bottle to hand? Look at him, he's such a pro.
Here's Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. Look at the stunning design of this. I think I'd just buy this on the bottle alone, to be honest with you.
Yeah, do you know what? I love the multifaceted nature of the glassware. It's gorgeous.
Now, apparently, as always in Japan, they're very, it's, just so amazingly arty and stuff. There's 24 facets here, which are meant to signify the 24 seasons in Japan and the kind of time that whiskey spends aging is as well why these kind of facets are here and then around the bottle lid here. So,
yeah, that's so interesting. And I actually think that the Suntory do a really great job with their glassware in general. If you've ever looked at Roku, which is their gin, they've got like the seasonal botanicals all like molded into the glass. So yeah, sometimes I think a bottle can be like style over substance, but I do think these are actually really thought through and it's gorgeous.
No, this isn't. Yeah, I agree with you. And sometimes we can be really drawn to the bottle. Go, oh my god, that's an amazing bottle. Who cares what's in it? But as we'll discuss, I think this isn't one of those cases because there's really good liquid inside of it, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it's so true. So let's kick off this evening. We're taking a little trip to Japan. And actually for me, Japanese whiskey, I mean, first of all, so interesting and so fascinating and such a storied history. I feel like there's so much we could talk about. So I'm not a Japanese whiskey expert, but one of the things that I love is the story of Masataka Taketsuru, whose name I think I've said right. I think I've said it right. And how I think it was in the 19th century, traveled over to Scotland to basically study distillation and brought back to Japan kind of like the principles, I guess, of distillation and whiskey making, and how much of the time Japanese whiskey, you can pretty much draw parallels with Scotch in terms of like the rules around production, what a blended whiskey means, what a single malt whiskey means. And yes, we can talk about this later if people are into it, but the recent decision about what is Japanese whiskey versus like, Japanese blended, all of this stuff. But I think for this one that we've got in front of us, Hibiki Japanese Harmony, it's a mix of single malt and grain whiskey from Japan. And I think if we draw the parallel between what blended Scotch means and Japanese blended whiskey means, it really works. It's an easy way to understand it.
Yeah, so this is, I think it's blend between, is it Hakushu, Yamazaki, and then the single grain from Cheetah?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you might have seen the Cheetah as a single grain separately. You can buy it separately. And as you all know, I'm a big fan of single grain. If people want to do a deep dive in single grain, definitely put it in the comments, but I will refrain from now. But basically, if you think about a blend, you've got your 100% single malt, your grain whiskey, blending it together in various proportions. And it's all about, as it says on the tin, harmony, harmoniousness, like the character of the malt singing, the character of the grain singing, bringing it together in a really compelling way so that it's something that's more than the sum of its parts. And I think this does it really well.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating about Japanese whiskey is the artistry that goes into blending and the artistry, the time, and it's not looked at in the same way as it is in the Scotch industry. It's really fascinating to see kind of how kind of meticulous they are about getting all these flavor profiles right and kind of blending them in to make something like this. It's just a shame with Japanese whiskey that not recently, with the Japanese whiskey boom, that it's been quite difficult to get hold of any age statement Japanese whiskey. So, we all know with the Bill Murray, the Hibiki 17 on the top of the Park Hyatt in Lost in Translation. And, these are one of the reasons, and it's been so fashionable. But they can't make age statements there over anymore. So this is another reason why we're getting these kind of blended whiskies, because they can release something at a reasonable price point that everyone can get their hands on, because they just don't have the stocks to make the 17-year-old anymore or the 12-year-old anymore.
Yeah. And it's so heartbreaking, but I do think that over time, like if you think about how much investment has gone into these distilleries, like production has been increased. The reason that we don't see age statements for Japanese anymore is a pure supply and demand economics issue. We all collectively, as whiskey lovers, discovered the incredibleness of Japanese whiskey, drank it all, and then we were like, oh, like, you know, age
gone.
statements minimum age. Now it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not solely.
I do really
Bill
hope.
Murray, by the way, it's not all Bill Murray's fault.
No. Yeah. So, can I just say, as an aside, before we get into this whiskey and casks and, you know, things like this, I do love Lost in Translation as a film. It's one of my all-time faves.
Yes, absolutely. From an amazing director.
It's amazing.
Yes, absolutely stunning. When I was in Japan, I had to go to that hotel.
Have you been to Japan?
Yes, I have. It's my favorite place I've ever been, I have to say. Yeah, Tokyo, beautiful place. I think if there's anywhere else, if there's anywhere else I could live, it would be there. It's just bonkers, but in a good way. So yeah.
It sounds amazing. I want to shout out a few comments and taste notes coming further into this whiskey. So green tea is green. I note, let me just find it. It's gone off green. I note that our little dram bottle has just one facet to represent the season that it will survive before I drink it. I'm with you, green tea is green. That's such good copy.
Very good.
And then we've got Real Winger getting a very fresh floral springtime note. Sean McCarrick, nice and clean on the nose. Floral. Ruth is saying it's very mellow, pepper, but I'm struggling to find something distinctive about it. That's interesting. We'll come back to that point. Tom Gillington, light and floral, reminds me a lot of my local distillery, Glenkinchie. Fascinating for me. Mike Pizarro, good nose, like a really light. Yes, I totally get that. Ian Jambo-Rain, very light and close, definitely getting a little bit of orange. Joe F also agrees on the orange. So orange peel tea bags, love it. Floral notes, nutty too. Chris Deegan, Suntory time. Yes, exactly. Bill Murray indeed. Green tea is green, beautifully balanced, very harmonious and precise, like a Japanese garden. I love that. We've got Sean having a chat with Tom about Glenkinchie, which is wonderful. Mike Sutcliffe, this is interesting. I worry about blends sometimes. I'm not a fan of consistency year after year. It's good to experience a changing character of the vintage's wine, changing seasons and terroir. So before we continue, because I'm loving your comments, please keep them coming in.
Yeah.
What do we think, Andy? What's your thoughts on like consistency?
I mean, if you're going to be selling something, like for example in the supermarket, something like that, you're going to have consistency. It's the same with like any product, whether it's whiskey or whatever you're buying. But I think there's a time and a place for everything. And if you know, there are so many whiskies out there which you can buy in batch form, and you can buy, you know, from the year. Like I've got a few, and Four Roses, who we're about to talk to in a bit. I mean, they're absolutely every year they're releasing another small batch, which is great. But then also there is a time and a place for whiskies that are consistently, and every time you buy it, that's the same product that you get. So, and that way it's more affordable as well, because as soon as you start releasing sometimes as well, kind of things that it's every year, it becomes quite expensive, and then things sell out, and there's a lot of these kind of things. Yeah, Becky's saying we do consistently amazing. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. You know what I think? I feel like sometimes I want that directional whiskey thing. And for me, that's where single cask comes in, small batch, annual releases. But for me, I think when we consider the artistry of blending a whiskey, the complexities of creating not only just consistent aroma and colour, but flavour as well, I think it's incredible to do that. I think it's really, really fabulous.
Well, that's when like the artistry and the science behind it. That's why master distillers and kind of the master blenders are so very important, especially in Japanese whiskey, because the talent and the palate to be able to consistently taste all these whiskeys from all these barrels and blend them to make the same product is genius, really.
Yeah, I think it really is. Oh my goodness, so many tasting notes. Do keep them coming in. And again, questions as well. Anything you're not sure about, anything you want to dig into, like we're just having a chat. So yeah, any thoughts, keep them coming in.
Yeah, there's loads of coming.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it. You go, Christy.
Shall I go? So I was going to shout out David Stanton, red berries, lychee, honey, and sandalwood. Joe F. There's a cream liqueur undertone to this on the nose, which I love. Ruth, much more vibrant on the nose and the palate. James, love this from James. Used to live in Tokyo. Many a drink and dinner in the Park Hyatt, early 90s before the film. I love that.
So you used to go there for a trip before they upped the prices even more. Just go, Bill Murray sat here.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I was there. Oh my goodness, there's so many. I'm going to skim through them and hand over to you, Andy. So Simon, lovely floral. Oh no, cherry blossom. Ian Turner, can smell the grain on the nose. Your Uncle Vanya, orange oil for me too. Marzipan and almonds, coffee and leather. It's so good. Mike Pizarro, my other half wants to visit Japan. Maybe I'll try for a whiskey tour there. Yes.
I didn't go on one, unfortunately, due to the nature of my trip. But yes, I would absolutely love to go to Japan and do a whiskey tour of one of these places.
Oh my gosh, it would be incredible. I'm gonna do a couple more and hand over to you, Andy. So Ian Jamboree, getting a bit of mint now from the Hakushu, maybe. I mean, this is the joy of blends, right? It's the different character from the component parts coming through. Yeah. Stuart, peaches and cream with a hint of pepper, and then DS007, nose, fruity notes, and a hint of light wood. Andy, can you take over? There's so many.
I can't remember who it was who was saying about that it's delicate, and I think it's a really interesting point. Because, like you say, with this blend, it's been designed to be of a certain style. So not one flavour should be really kind of so bold that it kind of spoils the other flavour. And I think that does make quite a delicate and subtle whiskey. And I find that often people want to try Japanese whiskey and they go, oh, we'll try the Hibiki Harmony. And they're sometimes disappointed by the nose because it is very delicate. And for me, it's quite subtle. And there's not that kind of like one thing that sticks out of you like an Isla Peat or, you know, a huge kind of sherry note in a sherry bomb or a sherry monster. It takes a while to sit with it and uncover all those kind of really interesting flavors that are coming from these different distilleries that are used in this blend. And I think that's a really interesting thing about it and something I often find about these Japanese blends.
Yeah, I agree. But what I will say on the palate, what really sets this apart for me is that really honeyed, unctuous, really quite thick texture. Like,
I've been talking so much, I haven't even tried it yet.
Oh my gosh, Andy. Okay, you taste it and I'll read some more out while you have a little sip. And cheers to everybody who's not had the sip yet. I've had a sip. Happy Thursday. Okay. It's so good. I'm loving it. Jeffster. Great spicy finish, not harsh. Got a drop of ginger, orange Cointreau, and Christmas pud. Okay, on that note, Christmas pud. We've not talked about the cask in this yet, and I think it's really important to draw a little bit of attention to it. So there are abundance of different casks in this, but the ones I want to talk about is American white oak. So lots of like maybe coconutty vibes that I'm getting. Japanese Mesnara oak, which for me can be really quite floral, but also where your Christmas cake note comes in, ex-sherry casks, which I really, really love. I'm also loving Gergo commenting that only we can see controversial on the orange cast, which I love.
We're here for the puns. Here for the puns.
Here for the puns. You've got the joy of him with 4 roses. I'm just teeing you
up. Come
up.
for the whiskey, stay for the puns.
Exactly. I love it. My goodness, I'm so behind these tasting notes. Ollie Cooper, agree with many here and getting the floral sweet berries and apricot notes. Andy, where are you? Have you got?
To be honest with you, Christy, I have no idea where you are. Colin Bathgate, are we there? Lovely on the nose, very easy drinking and pleasant.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
And that bottle is beautiful. I do think, as what Christy was saying, that sometimes a bottle can get in the way of, you know, you just think, oh, wow, that's an amazing bottle, but the liquid inside, you know, may not be as good. I think this adds to the whole kind of time and place thing with Japanese whiskey. You've got this beautifully designed, and only in Japan could they make something that beautiful like that. With just such care and elegance that has gone into it. And the same with the whiskey inside of it. It really adds to the experience when you pour it out of that glass and drink something as beautiful as this. It adds to that experience and it makes you want to savor it and take your time with drinking it. So yeah, I'm with you there. Ollie Cooper, definitely agree with many here. I'm getting the floral sweet berries and apricot notes, gorgeous. Ian WT, lots of fruit left on the palate. Sean McCarrick, water definitely brings out the spices and a little white pepper at the end. The Cask Lad, definitely a bottle to have at the shelf for the design alone, but not one I would choose to purchase for taste. Interesting. I mean, I think that to let this one sit, by the way, because you'll come back to it and I think it'll be completely different, this one. Yeah, absolutely. This is, with whiskey, it's all subjective, so everybody is going to have different choices. Chris Dagnan, clue is in the name, harmony, exactly.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like with a blend where we're taking component parts and blending them out for smoothness, I completely agree. I think this is very harmonious. It maybe isn't like, super directional, but it's very interesting and very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's not, we're not discordant here or anything like that. Mike Pizarro, this is the best Japanese whiskey I've had. It's very smooth and light. Definitely one for the spring sunshine. Maybe I should take up to lunchtime drinking for a few months. Pour and sip after 7:30. I also should say that this is a Japanese whiskey, even by the new definitions of it. So, which we've spoken about before as well. Am I opening a can of worms though? Before it's 5 to 8. Sorry.
I think it's okay. Okay, we're gonna have a couple more minutes on this, and then we're gonna move to the US for bourbon. But yeah, just to say for a bit of context, that people aren't quite up to speed, and I'm very much not, 100% up to speed on this because it is a little bit complex. But earlier this year or last year, even in 2021, April 2021, the Japan Spirits and Liqueur Makers Association came up with a new way of classifying Japanese whiskey, which was immensely fascinating. Top line info. It's been kind of an open secret in the industry for some time that a lot of Japanese, not a lot, some were importing Scotch whiskey and then adding it to their Japanese whiskey, either as a blend or basically rebottling as a single malt. And for me, we've had Mars on here before who have been super transparent about it.
That's what it was. That's when we were talking, and we had recently just come out all that information, and then we did our pour and sip.
Yeah,
and we were talking about it, weren't we?
Yeah, and plenty of producers, Mars being one, had been like, we are doing this super transparently. And for me, if it results in good whiskey, kind of doesn't matter as long as that I'm told as a consumer.
Yeah.
And what this new regulation says is that you cannot be a Japanese whiskey, or I think you're a Japanese whiskey blended in Japan or something like this if you haven't done it. But this is a whiskey that's entirely made up of Japanese whiskey. We know this. It's sticks by the new rules. We're all good.
Absolutely. So we can all call this Japanese whiskey. I mean, we could anyway. I mean, it's not law. It's transparency, and there's been many Japanese whiskies, and ones that I love, for example, like Nika from the Barrel, which was always one of my favorite Japanese whiskies. Then but it did, and they've. I think Nika instantly came out as well after that, and it wasn't like a try and hide it. Oh no, we didn't. It was like no, we are, and that's now the rules have changed. That we're going to do this, and so that's really interesting. Joe F, neat. I find the flavour to be fairly flat. With 3 droplets of water, it opens up a lot. More to red berries and real oak spice that mellows to a long, cooling, sweet finish. El Southern, sadly, it's not hitting the spot for me. Honestly, I find this a lot with this dram because I think it is really subtle and it is really kind of light. And sometimes, on first sip, it can be a bit... I thought so uninspiring, but with time, this one really, really, really sits and really opens up.
Yeah.
And definitely a couple of drops of water is also going to open this up even more. David Stanton, finished brown sugar, citrus, peels, hints of Mizunara. Jim Glancy, light and delicious, surprisingly really long finish, lasts for ages on the tongue. Green tea is green. Mike Pizarro, I agree. Though most too light for its own good, but on warm spring evenings, sitting in the garden, Japanese or otherwise, it would be rather pleasant. Honestly, if you live in London, take this bottle with you. I used to do it for Instagram picture purposes. To the wonderful Japanese gardens in Holland Park, which are absolutely...
Oh my gosh, do it. Beautiful.
And I mean, don't pour the whiskey, there and drink it right there. But I used to take pictures of that bottle, and it was my favourite bottle to take pictures of in that beautiful Japanese Zen garden. And this is a wonderful, I think, summer kind of spring dram for the garden in general. Absolutely, 100%.
It's basically giving me hope of spring, this whiskey.
Yes.
I feel like it's the florals really coming through. And I'm just very aware of time. I'm just going to shout out one more before we move on. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Donatian said, should I add water here? I think if we just take a couple of minutes before we move on to talk about water and whiskey. So basically, for me, and Andy, be interested to get your thoughts. I feel like your whiskey is your whiskey. Enjoy it how you want. There is no shame in adding water to a whiskey ever. Blenders will water down a lot because what you're doing when you're adding water to a whiskey, you're basically diluting some of those harsher alcohol notes and you're giving your own sensory system a better chance of picking out these flavors. So definitely feel free. If something feels harsh or if something feels like too much, if it's difficult, definitely add a few drops. But what I would say as a note of caution is that you can add more in, but you can't take it out. So do it slowly.
And especially with a pour and sip bottle, you really don't want to drown this.
There's hardly any left. I don't want to drown it.
To be honest with you, with a sample size like this, you know, like a 3 centiliter sample size, I would personally drink the first couple of drops, possibly sipped neat, just to really kind of get to grips with it. And then I would thinking about adding a slight drop of water or something like that if I felt like it needed opening up. So I definitely wouldn't add water at the start. Personally, again, this is all subjective. I would definitely have a sip of it neat first.
Yeah,
just my opinion. David Stanton is saying this is the best Japanese whiskey he's ever tried. So that just goes to show you how amazing whiskey really is and how we all just have different opinions. Some people might think that it falls flat for them and some people think it's absolutely brilliant. And that's the great thing about whiskey. And that's why we can talk about it for so long, because we all have different opinions. Chris Randall, bring on the bourbon. Does that mean you want me and Chris to stop talking about the Japanese?
Yeah, we're going to be done with Japanese whiskey in 1 second. One more thing. So the Cask lad has said, is Japanese whiskey now authenticated? I understood that previously imported from Scotland, Boston, Japan. So it is very complicated. If you want more information on this, get in touch with us on social, like on our Pour and Sip channels, and we will send you more. Essentially, if it is, I think it's voluntarily from this April just gone, but from 2024, it's going to be more of an established thing so that producers have a chance to, like, you know, tweak any recipes and stuff like this. But there are places you can see online to know where your Japanese whiskey has come from. But I think essentially for me, and I think for Andy as well, it can be an amazing whiskey wherever it comes from. Just tell us what it is.
It's just about transparency.
Yeah.
So if you are going to use Scotch or something from Scotland, you know, in your Japanese whiskey, you're just not going to be able to call it Japanese whiskey essentially, and you're going to have to be transparent with that. And if you are going to, so that's really what it is. It's not like you can't. It's just transparency. I think.
Exactly. But slide into our DMs if you want to know more, because we could talk about this for about 4 hours, but we've got 2 more whiskies to taste.
We have. And I feel like you're sitting there waiting patiently, like, come on, I want to drink some Four Roses.
Exactly. Should we bring him in? So, Gergo, let's bring him in now, and we'll take a trip from Japan to the US. How are you doing?
Hello, friends. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh, I'm doing so well. I mean, we just had a lovely Japanese whiskey. We're about to taste some bourbon. All is well.
Yes, absolutely.
I can't wait. So, and from what I'm hearing, some others can't wait too, which is a good start.
There's a lot of comments like, bring on the bourbon.
Bring on the bourbon. So I will leave you both to it. I will catch you up in a bit. I will be tasting along. Looking forward to it.
See you later.
See you later.
Firstly, I want that T-shirt.
It is good, isn't it? So this is you can't see the back. So this is from Portland Cocktail Week. This is from a friend in the US. We've got a few in the UK. I'll see if I can get you one. But this is specifically from the US edition of Four Roses. I've got a couple, thanks to my wife's connections, that I'm very, very proud of. And yeah, because 90% of all my clothes, like any ex-bartender and current bartender, 90% of everything I have is black. I needed a black Four Roses t-shirt.
No, so I'll slide into your DMs. Anyway, talk to us a bit about yourself and how you found yourself working for Four Roses.
So for many years I used to be a rum guy, with American whiskey being my second favorite spirit. So I did years work. I worked for Rum JM. I worked for the Rum McCoy. I worked for the Valley Park Estate from Jamaica. I managed Trailer Happiness for nearly 5 years in Portobello Road in London, in West London. For those of you who are into rum, you will no doubt be familiar with the trailer. Yeah.
Don't remember what I did there.
But when I was working with Valley Park was when Spirit Cartel picked it up. And for years I had Four Roses as my house pour whiskey. So I was very much very keen on dealing with them. I absolutely loved the whiskey. I loved everything they did. And at one point I was kind of looking like, all right, I've done my time behind the bar. I want to do something different, and not just part-time. I actually want to do something different. I heard about Four Roses opening up, so I sought out David, who's the managing director of Spirit Cartel. I was like, I heard you got something incredibly cool going on. And a few interviews later, I was lucky enough to be able to represent Four Roses. I originally come from Hungary in Central East Europe. Um, I've always drank spirits because I never really drank beer. I used to drink a lot of wine, and then I got into spirits, and I got into cocktails, and I got into bartending when I moved to the UK. So spirits have always kind of accompanied me, and I've been just I love all spirits in general, and American whiskey in particular. It's so much more diverse than people like to think of it, or people like to paint it.
Well, we've already got people here saying, I wasn't big on bourbon or American whiskey for that matter, but this one changed my mind, or that one changed my mind.
Yeah, I genuinely can't wait to tell people why that is. Why this particular American whiskey.
Well, I think that's a good.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good point for us to go on to that. I have to say as well, for me, Four Roses single barrel was always my house pour here as well on my bar. It's just, I've always said, for the price, that is, if anyone ever asks me what's just a really good bourbon to put on my bar, which isn't too pricey, that is 100% the one. But you tell us why that is, and what it is about Four Roses that separates it from the other Kentucky bourbons.
Well, so when you look at a lot of bourbon, when you look at pretty much all mainstream bourbon, all of the big distilleries and all of the big brands we think of, what you tend to encounter is you've got a consistent mash bill across all of them. You got a consistent yeast strain. You've got a distillery with 4 or 5 or 6 expressions. They're all really well known and all really, really well loved. But it is the same mash bill, it is the same yeast strain, and what you're differentiating is where it is in the warehouse, how long is it aged, how much barrel interaction you get. You might have the same whiskey that spent some time at the bottom of your warehouse, and you have the same whiskey spending however many years at the top, and you've got all this crazy interaction that's going to lead to a very, very different end product. With Four Roses, we don't do that. But first of all, we've got 2 different mash bills. Most of the time, if you got your second mash bill with American whiskey, it's because you're making a wheated bourbon. Some of the biggest and most well-known and most beloved and absolutely fantastic. You've mentioned Valor. I adore Valor with all my heart. Obviously, Valor is a wheated whiskey. And what you have there is you've got the same mash bill that you would have in some of the other whiskeys from the same company, but with rye rather than wheat. But that tends to be kind of the main difference. Whereas with Four Roses, we've got two mash bills. We've got our so-called high corn mash bill, 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley, and that 20% rye is incredibly high when it comes to most mainstream bourbons. You just don't have that, and that's our lower one. And then you have the one that we are using in the single barrel, at least on the export market, which is our high rye one. So that's the 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. So Brent, our master distiller, he gets approached a lot, going like, "Oh, Brent, when are you gonna go and do a rye whiskey?" And quite often he says, "Well, I've got a bourbon with 35% rye." It's got that richness, it's got that complexity, that spicy flavor, that bite that you're looking for in a rye whiskey. And then the other thing is, because of our company's history, so to cut it very short, in 1943, Four Roses was bought by Seagrams, the Canadian whiskey company. They're the ones who used to do Canadian Club and VO and Crown Royal and all those. And they turned Four Roses on the American market. They turned it into a blended whiskey, into a Canadian-style blended whiskey, from 5 different distilleries. And when Kirin, the Japanese company who owns Four Roses to this day, when they bought it back in 2002, they kept the yeast from all these distilleries. So we're using 5 yeasts. So you've got 2 mash bills and you've got 5 yeasts. You've got 10 different bourbons. And as I mentioned, when you're looking at most of the mainstream big bourbons, you've got one, maybe two bourbons when you're doing a wheated. But whereas with us, you got 10 different ones. And then the other big thing that we do that's very, very different from anyone is just single record warehouses.
Okay.
So you're not gonna have one barrel getting way, way, way more interaction. You're gonna have a very, very consistent flavor. And it's gonna be, it's going to be softer. It's going to be a little more mellow because you're not gonna have that incredible amount of wood interaction. But it also means it's going to be a little more distillate driven, and that's what we're looking for. Like barrel driven whiskeys are amazing, and I love them. Again, I love American whiskey as a category, but having a distillate driven whiskey is incredibly cool. Where you get all that corn and you get all that rye, and you get the yeast interaction. And when you nose Four Roses single barrel, which is I'm not gonna lie, it is my favorite of the lineup from our regular ones. When you nose it, it is our high rye mash bill, and then it is.
Because I think I can't remember who it was who's written here in the notes about it being quite spicy on the nose.
So that's that 35% rye in there in the mash bill. And then from the 5 yeasts that we use, this is the one that is called our light fruit yeast or delicate fruit yeast. So that's going to give you big flavors of sort of peach and apricot and pear and cherry. So that stone fruit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting there.
Yeah, so I just want to read out before we talk further about this, because so many people are writing tasting notes at the moment.
Of course.
Darren Gormley, getting toffee on the nose. Tom Gillingwater. I too thought I wasn't big on bourbon, but absolutely loved the Redwood Empire. Even ordered a few bottles for my stash. That's nice, says John Pollard. Mark Hartle, whiff of caramel maybe. Sean McCarrick, sweet on the nose and green apples. Simon, maple syrup. Real Boinga. I'm sorry, that's a great name. Stewed pears on the nose. Cooper, I love bourbon, love Four Roses, chocolatey, leathery, toffee vibes on the nose with a hint of oak and vanilla. Panda Bear, weirdly getting a slight cheese note, maybe Rockford or Parmesan crust. Interesting. David Stanton, nose spices and chocolate, toffee and vanilla, pear and cacao. Neil Bolton, classic toffee popcorn. DH, nose, corn, guitar pens. Not sure what that is. I
like it as a tasting note.
Yeah,
but a number of people have mentioned pears, and again, that kind of sort of soft fruit and that kind of rich stone fruit is one of the big ones. And then another one that I've heard consistently, and that is something I tell people, is sort of bitter chocolate and cigar tobacco. There's a bit of bitterness there, but it's not the bad kind of bitterness. It's that good complex bitter note that you get, and it's a combination of the oak. Obviously, American oak will always have a massive effect on bourbon, but when that oak interaction takes over, what you have is caramel and vanilla, and not much beyond that. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we can pull it off and have all these wonderful complex flavors coming through. Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely a testament to the work being done.
Absolutely, and this palate's slightly minty as well. I get like a kind of almost like a eucalyptus kind of note on the finish as well, and this kind of it is a little minty note as well on the finish, and I think that's possibly from the rye.
So not necessarily with this one, but on some of our other expressions, we have a yeast strain that we call our herbaceous yeast strain, mm-hmm. which has sort of big mint, eucalyptus, oregano, and basil flavors. Mm-hmm. So with the new Small Batch Select, which is our newest expression, came out at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. That's one of the yeasts that we use that presents itself really interestingly in some of the bourbons.
So see how that you can use, and the Four Roses actually celebrate the use of these different yeasts. I mean, what one is it in this one again, and what's the name of it? Because I always look at it and I just see letters like OBVS.
So this is our delicate fruit yeast. Yeah. Okay. So with Four Roses, you always have a 4-letter code. Yeah. The first one, the O, always stands for for it being made at the Four Roses Distillery, and then you have a code for either mash bill. Then you have a code for which always stands for being a Kentucky straight bourbon. So we always age for at least 4 years, and then the yeast strain. So those little 4-letter codes that you see on all of Four Roses.
Yeah,
that's the key to crack them.
Okay, it's like the code. So just some more notes. Joe F, that usual maple hit on the nose, green apples, a hint of peppermint, spiced nutty notes also. So a lot of people are getting kind of a minty note. So I'd be interested to see what everyone thought of the different yeast strain of is it the small batch select you were saying, which has the real minty one. How much more minty that one would be for everybody. Jeffster, 50%. I've already had to add a few drops of H2O. I have to say as well, is it bottled at 50%? So this is 100 proof, as they would say in America. Just don't get confused by that, guys. It's like, in American bourbon, it's called proof. We just talk about alcohol percentage. So just half the proof. So if it's 100 proof, it's 50% alcohol volume, ABV. But that's a great number for me for a whiskey that's kind of like your generic whiskey from the Four Roses range. I mean, we're not talking about a limited edition range of 50%. That's really great. It's not your Buffalo Trace at 40%, your standard. I know my favorite whiskey ever, by the way, is this one here. It's actually sitting right in front of me. This one here is my favorite American.
2018. Yes.
2018. That is one of the best whiskeys.
What a whiskey. I mean, have you had the 2021 limited, the latest limited?
Is it 2021 or 2020?
2021.
Oh, I haven't had 2021. I've got 2020 up there.
So the idea behind 2021 is very, very simple. The one regular complaint we get as such is because of the way Four Roses does their whiskeys, is that a lot of bourbon enthusiasts occasionally go, yeah, but you don't do anything really cask-led. So Brent, our master distiller, was like, all right, have all the cask interaction you can handle. So it's the highest ABV we've ever released. It's 57.1.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you add water to this one, you'll definitely be adding water to that one.
And it's very much barrel led. So you've got huge, especially baking spice. Lots and lots of cinnamon, lots of cloves, lots of nutmeg. But yeah, the 130th anniversary, the 2018. Yeah, it's my second favorite. This is the only one that beats it. But
that's so. Just talking about that, from the Four Roses range, you have the kind of the standard releases, which is like the single barrel, the small batch.
Yeah. So the original, the small batch, single barrel. Yeah, and now we've added the small batch select. So that's in 30 states in the US, and then it's in the UK and nowhere else. Mm-hmm. So we're one of the very, very few places to enjoy this. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Just a few more notes. Chris Randall, lovely colour, smells of sweet bananas in a wooden box. Lovely. Joe F, that charred oak really pierces through every few sniffs. Tom Gillingwater, drops of water brings out foam banana sweet. Jim Glancy, mint julep time would make a great cocktail. And now people asking, what's your vibe? You're a barman. You've done your time. What cocktail would you put this single?
I'm a very, very big fan of putting this into Boulevardiers and left hands. So combining it with a bit of a move, bit of Campari. I know Campari can be a contentious subject among a lot of drinkers. But yes, I'm a big fan of using them. And then obviously old fashions is just a fantastic base for those. It's got enough ABV to really stand up to being the star of the show. And then something I combine every Four Roses expression with. So the original, the small batch, and this one, because as I mentioned, when we were talking earlier, is that big peach and apricot note. I tend to use peach iced tea a lot. With,
oh wow! Okay,
with the bourbon. It's just fantastic combination. One thing I wanted to point out with regards to the bottle. So if you've got an actual bottle of the single barrel, so one thing you can see here is the warehouse code.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this one is PS So there's a southern part of the P warehouse, and then you have the barrel number as well. So that's on every label of Four Roses single barrel. So obviously in the US, it's even more important because a lot of people collect bottles from various warehouses and various combinations of yeast and mash bill, which unfortunately on the export market currently we only have this one combination of the high rye and the delicate fruit. But in the US, you can pretty much get any combination of them, and a lot of specialist stores and bars have their own barrel picks. And honestly, one of my favorite stories was when I learned that Whole Foods in the US have their own single barrel of Four Roses, which is incredible when you think of
Whole Foods in general.
I always think of Whole Foods as health food. So it's like, yeah, come get your breakfast muesli and your single barrel pick of Four Roses that you cost strength that you can't get anywhere else.
That one Whole Foods is like a store pick, right? From that one Whole Foods. Okay, that's great. I'd love to see that. That's amazing. I hope Piccadilly Circus here in London does the same thing. So just a couple more notes. Nigel Gaines saying, reminds me, what is a mash bill? Very simply, it's the recipe, right?
Yeah. So a mash bill is the recipe that you use. So with American whiskey, unlike something like a single malt Scotch, where you always have malted barley, bourbon always has to have a minimum of 51% corn in its mix. But equally, you can't go over 80%. So once you go over 80%, you have what is called a corn whiskey, which is an absolutely delicious spirit, but it is not bourbon. So bourbon tends to be a combination of different grains. So that's what your mash bill is. So it's normally made up of some combination of corn, rye, and malted barley. So the reason for the malted barley, and this is a useful bit of information. Obviously, when you're fermenting your spirits, the one thing you have to have is sugar, for any fermentation, And in the case of something like rum, it's easy because you've got sugarcane juice or you've got molasses, you got all that sugar there. Or in the case of agave spirits, you've got your agave, the sugar is there. But when it comes to whiskey, when it comes to grains, all that sugar is logged in starches. You need to convert those starches to sugar first before you can ferment them. That's why you have milling and mashing. You have these processes. But with malted barley, it contains an enzyme that helps break down these starches, helps convert them to sugar. So the reason why malted barley is present in a lot of American whiskey and a lot of these mash bills, a lot of these recipes, is to help with the fermentation. And also the reason why we use so little, why it's 5% in both recipes, is because we only want it to help with the ferment. We don't want it to have a big effect on the actual flavor, on the actual taste profile of our ferment. So that's what a mash bill is. It is essentially a recipe. It's a combination of grains you use to create.
But 51% corn in order to be called bourbon. So just a few more notes, and then we really do have to go because it's been great talking to you, but we are running out of time dramatically. El Sutton, 50%, but still easy drinking. Helena Cassidy, high rye taste. John Pollard, is this widely available in the UK? It absolutely is. And don't forget, really, if you want to get this, please head to the Pour and Sip store, as you will have your discount on this one. And sorry that we have got so many notes coming through on this. Sorry guys that I can't read as many of these out because we are just running out of time. So I'm going to invite Christy back in. Hello Christy, how's it going?
Hi. That was fabulous. Thank you so much both. I feel like we've had the bourbon safari almost.
Yeah, Bruce Edwards actually, sorry, just a couple of notes. Bruce Edwards was saying Pour and Sip has converted him to bourbons. So that is what we do over here. And again, David Stanton, didn't know I liked bourbon until I joined Pour and Sip. I'm loving this one. So yeah, I think Four Roses is definitely one. And that's why I was saying to you earlier about the Four Roses. It's one of those ones, if someone says, I don't know much about bourbon, can you get me a bourbon that's a decent price, but it's just a really good one? Definitely, this is the one. Yeah,
it's a gorgeous, gorgeous whiskey for sure. And Gergo, will you hang around for another 15, 20 minutes or so and then come and join us?
No, of course. Any questions in the future, just drop them my way. Yeah, I'll be here.
Incredible. So anyone watching who's still got some burning bourbon questions, get them through and we'll have a little whiskey chat at the end.
There's a note, just sorry, from Barry a question, and we'll ask when Gergo comes back, we'll ask him that question. I'll just take a note of that.
Okay, wonderful. We've got it. So thank you so much. We'll catch up with you in a bit. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I mean, we are being treated this evening, Andy.
Yes.
So much good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. This is the problem. It's so good that we just we run over.
It's terrible. I'm going to bring Chris in at this point because we've got a whole third whiskey to get through.
Yes.
Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Hi, guys. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Wonderful. How's your evening been? Have you been tasting along?
I've been tasting along. I'm lucky enough to have tried both of those whiskies before, but yeah, still great to revisit them. And the beauty of something like Four Roses single barrel is it's not the same every time as we just found out.
Yeah,
fabulous. And we're going to do a deep dive into, I was going to say English whiskey, but this one's more of a British whiskey, which we'll find out about. So we'll say bye to you for now, Andy, but we'll catch you shortly.
See you later, guys.
So exciting. I feel like we have such a geographically diverse tasting right now. But before we dig into the whiskey itself, Chris, tell us a bit about you. Who are you and how are you involved with the Lakes Distillery?
Oh God! So I've been with the Lakes now for 5 years. So when I joined the Lakes, we didn't have any single malt, which is obviously always an interesting starting point when you join a whiskey distillery that's professing to make single malt. But prior to this, I used to work for Bruichladdich, and prior to that, I used to manage whiskey shops for 4 years. So obviously, kind of loved whiskey for a long time now. Been drinking it for 10, 11, 12 years. The wife doesn't like how much whiskey I've got at home. Cupboards are full, overspilling. But absolutely love whiskey. And, the Lakes was a great opportunity for me to, be part of what is obviously in a really exciting English whiskey movement that's going on at the moment.
Amazing. And the Lakes might be familiar to any long-standing Pour and Sip members because we were talking about the Lakes last year, I think.
I believe it was back end of 2020 from memory.
Oh my gosh. Okay, over a year ago. That's a shocking development.
So not too long ago. But yeah, I mean, we've obviously done, some stuff quite a lot with Master of Malt and obviously Pour and Sip is obviously just a great opportunity for us to obviously get our product out there to people like the guys on the call today.
Amazing. I have been lucky and I genuinely loved both visits to go and check out the Lakes twice. And for me, something that really sets the distillery apart is how passionate you guys are about casks. I feel like you are obsessed with flavor and about how casks influence flavor. So give us a bit of a taste of your approach and your philosophy to kind of cask management, wood management.
Yeah, really good question. You're right, nail on the head. The distillery, what we're all about is being incredibly cask forward. We believe that 80 to 90%, if not more, of the flavor of any whiskey comes from the cask. So we spend most of our time, energy, and of course cost on obviously procuring the best casks and nurturing those casks the best way we can. So cask forward, all of our time is spent doing that. So we actually use a process that the cognac channel category has been using for a long time now, which is called Elevage, which is basically kind of an art form where basically you're blending throughout the maturation of the spirit. Within cognac, they blend for consistency. We blend to actually enhance certain character or flavor within that whiskey. So let's say, for example, we've got a massive 500-litre sherry butt that's maturing nicely, but actually it's producing certain characteristics that are a bit dull or not quite right. We might, take that cask and split it away and put it in something else. Or we could actually say, okay, well, actually it's maturing incredibly well and producing such unique flavors that we actually want to pinch some of those flavors and move them elsewhere. So it's a really unique way of looking at it. Most distilleries, to an extent, will effectively put whiskey in a cask, wait 10, 12, 11, 12 years, whatever it might be, and then go and taste it and then blend it, obviously, at that stage where, we don't do that. We're constantly tasting, constantly evaluating, and constantly trying to change the direction of that liquid.
And that must just be so fascinating because... So for me, casks, I feel like a really inexact science. You have some really active casks, some casks which are really chill, some which impart loads of flavor, some which are a bit,
Yeah.
don't really do anything. So for you and the team, are you nosing and tasting on like a daily basis? Like, how do you keep track of what's going on?
Good question. The guys are testing all the time, but at the same time, what we do is we actually have an amazing blending lab at the distillery, whereby our whiskey maker Davil actually has literally every single cask that we have at our disposal of a certain age is constantly being moved into 20 cl bottles, so that we can map out the flavors. So you can picture 4,000 20 cl bottles on a table, and and actually evaluating them all and moving them around and kind of going, well, actually, these go really well together, and these have certain characteristics that produce certain things. And I think people kind of potentially naively assume that if a whiskey's at a certain age and it's been matured in the same style of cask, that it will produce the same flavors. Well, unfortunately not. As you say, casks aren't quite as obedient as that. They want to play their own tune, and I think kind of the best way to think about whiskey, and actually maybe just something to think about for everyone obviously watching now, is if you were to fill 100 casks with the same whiskey from the same distillate on the same day, and all of the variables remain the same for 10 years, every single cask will taste different, and everyone will obviously have a different color and feel, and of course actually they'll even have a different ABV. So all of those variables could be the same, but actually different flavor profiles. So that we are kind of using that and harnessing that to our advantage, and obviously using Davil's amazing blending techniques, and well, memory is the main thing, memory of the flavors and memory of how to bring those to life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. And before we got into the whiskey itself, just a quick shout out to Davil, really, because he joined you guys from the Macallan, right? Which is such like a heavyweight whiskey name. Like, he knows his stuff when it comes to casks and blending and putting all the component parts together.
Yeah, I think kind of the main thing that Davil brings to the game really is his, as I said, his memory and his ability to nose and understand the flavors. And then I think one of the best things I could say is that if you say, oh, what is cask 4621 or whatever, he could go, oh yeah, it's a sherry butt that's been filled on this date, it's approximately so many years old,
oh my gosh,
and it's got so many bulk liters in. Like, he could literally tell you that level of detail. So I think in a way that gives you an idea of the amount of energy and time he puts into these things. Yeah.
It's magnificent. Honestly, I just cannot get my head around like the absolute library of flavor and aromas that are there. But just a quick shout out to some people, and I'm going to dig into this whiskey with you. But first of all, shout out to Alistair. I'm a Lakes Founders member and have loved all of the Founders releases and the Whiskey Makers editions, which is very cool. David Stanton knows pineapple upside down cake, ginger chewy toffee, and orange grapefruit peel. Al Sutton says it smells like a Speyside, which we'll get into shortly. Hold on to your tasting glasses. Chris says buttery, maybe a biscuit base. That's very Mary Berry of you, I feel. Is that a Bake Off reference? So here's Alistair again, who is a founder member. The original one, so the one I couldn't get on with. Is this now the Lake's own whiskey? And if so, what sort of percent? Okay, so this is a great segue to get into the whiskey itself.
Yes.
We know this is a blend. We know there's some Speyside. We know there's some Islay. We know there's some English whiskey from the Lakes, your very own whiskey. What is the makeup? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. So, I mean, obviously, I can't give away the exact percentages because actually they change each time.
Okay.
But in terms of giving you an idea of what's in there, so it's our single malt is the backbone. Of course, it doesn't necessarily take up like a humongous proportion of the blend, but because of the way we make our whiskey, our house style is very much sherry influenced. Yeah. So Oloroso and PX sherry on our most common cask that we use for our single malt. So we kind of want that to be the backbone of the whiskey for any whiskey we make. But with the one blend, it's completely different to what it was before. Before it was very much kind of borrowing lots of different flavors and almost kind of trying to be a crowd pleaser.
Yeah,
kind of scrap that. Effectively, what we're trying to do now is almost the opposite of that. We're trying to produce blended whiskies with real character. So it's almost more like a single malt than a blend. So I think most people, when they think of blends, is obviously they think about the word consistency and balance and having that same character each time. Whereas this isn't that. This is very much about producing some unique flavors and actually just showcasing how good we are at blending,
Yeah.
and active cask management, as we mentioned earlier. So the one fine blend is our kind of house blended whiskey, our classic blend, which takes our Lake single malt, blends it with Scottish single malts, predominantly from Speyside, and actually there's a couple of Islay whiskies in there as well. So you are going to get some peated flavors in here, relatively subtle, but there is a couple of peated whiskies. And then, of course, we have some grain whiskey. But again, what's different from most blended whiskies is that most blended whiskies, the grain content could be upwards of 90% grain, just a very small amount of malt whiskey. Whereas we're literally almost flip those numbers the other way around. It's much more malt content with a smaller amount of grain. The reason being is, again, we want more character to come from it, and we want in our single malt to kind of be the heart of the whiskey, with the other whiskies just kind of complementing it. And then we want to add an extra layer of flavor.
Yeah, this is amazing. I'm going to say cheers, and I'm going to take a little sip when I ask you this next question, because I've been nosing it for a while, and I just need to get it. I can see everyone's tasting notes. Like, your Uncle Vanya, this is gorgeous. Graham Lloyd Jones, very light smoke on the bonfire that went out last night. Oh, I love it. David Stanton, honeyed malt, dark chocolate and strawberry, jam and cream, buttered crumpets, clove and nutmeg. Like, I've got serious FOMO, right? So I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to have a little sip because I just cannot wait any longer. We have Moscatel casks going on here, which is very exciting, because I feel like, okay, my understanding of wine and fortified wine is pretty minimal, but this is like a very specific type of fortified wine, I understand, that gives like a very specific type of sweetness.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, that's right. So I think kind of people hear the word Moscatel and actually could come from two contexts, so both sherry and wine. This is very much wine. So it comes from the province of Andalusia, which I'm sure most people have heard of, but there's a little town called, I might pronounce this wrong, but Chapiona.
And would this be the same place your orange wine cask come from? I feel like Andalusia was from there as well.
Yeah, that is correct. Yes.
Yes.
So Andalusia is kind of like famous for sherry and for wine. Yeah. So actually, it's the same grape variety, but of course used in different ways. So the beauty of Moscatel wine is that it adds lovely honeyed, light, sweet, very floral note to the whiskey. Very few distilleries use it because it's almost, in inverted commas, too subtle. But with nearly all the casks that we use, we want really active casks. Really, I like to use it with juicy casks that release flavor really quickly. So what we do with a Moscatel is we basically effectively take out the one fine blend, which has been married for 6 to 12 months. We marry the whiskies together, but then what we do is we put that whiskey that's been married back into the Moscatel wine cask for approximately 12 to 18 months, which doesn't sound like a long time, but actually, just to give you a color representation, this is the one Moscatel. This is another one of our versions called the one sherry.
Oh wow, that's a profound difference.
Which is literally just 12 months in the respective casks has made that level of difference. Obviously, color is one thing, flavor is another, but trust me, the flavors couldn't be more contrasting. So we very much see the one fine blend as being like a backbone, and then we're like, it's almost like having a great piece of toast and you're putting jam on the top. You're just giving it that extra layer and flavor and character. Oh
my goodness, we love food references at Pour and Sip, and just you saying about toast, I'm just like, now I'm so hungry. I just want to read out some comments because people are absolutely loving this, and I've got like a last question for you. So Graham Lloyd Jones, I don't have any good English whiskey, so I'll have to make space for this. Mike Pizarro, this really stands out. Muscat undertones from start to end. Also peaty, pineapple, great depth of flavor. Taking my time on this, but I think this could be a new favorite for me. Simon, this is growing on me. Marmite and buttery toast. It's the toast again. John Pollard saying, I agree. I've been reared on Irish whiskey, so I like the mellow nature of this one. This is the best of the evening. We've got so many. Jared saying, wow, palate is amazing. Honey, green tea, and macerated cherries. Guy CP, anyone else really picking up on ripe banana and caramel, banoffee pie in the glass? Oh my gosh, it's making me very hungry. Joe, I'll do the last one for now because I have a question and I'm getting very hungry and we need to bring everyone back in. This is an unusual dram, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. Lots of biscuits, buttered toast, again. Gentle peat flowing throughout, a lot of orange and such a fruity finish that flows to more lasting orange. By the way, everyone's taken it. It's phenomenal. But before we move on and bring everyone back in, tell us. So we've got the backbone of this is your own single malt. The Lakes single malt, where are we at with this? You've got some releases now. What does the future look like? When can we taste more from the Lakes?
Well, yeah, really exciting times at the Lakes at the moment. I mean, as I said, when I first joined, it was just like, oh, when's it coming? When's it coming? And of course, you know, it has to be 3 years and 1 day to be considered a single malt. We first started distilling back in 2014. So obviously, technically, we could have bottled something in 2017, 18. We didn't release our first kind of commercially available single malt until September 2019, which was very, very successful. Obviously, people kind of very excited about that first release. Since then, we're about to release our 5th version of that house style of whiskey, which is Whiskey Maker's Reserve. The idea of Whiskey Maker's Reserve is that's our house style. As I said, it's using Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez, predominantly a little bit red wine casks, and then a very small amount of bourbon casks, just all about balance. And the idea of those is that we're taking people on a journey, and eventually we'll drop the number 5, number 6, whatever it might be. We'll drop that number, and that'll just be kind of like our house whiskey that people will know and love, hopefully, in years to come. And then alongside that, we produced another range of whiskies called Whiskey Maker's Editions, which last year we released quite a few versions of, which we call them diversions from our house style, because basically it's where Davil has got all these amazing whiskies, because we experiment with ungodly amounts of different whiskies. I think at last count there's over 100 different casks styles.
Which is amazing.
But the beauty of them is that we want to use them in Whiskey Maker's Reserve, but actually occasionally Davil kind of identify something that's a bit different and unique that doesn't quite fit within the Whiskey Maker's Reserve range, but also is just too good to be blended away. So that's how these are born. A lot of them have been quite small releases, so like literally as low as 300 bottles, but they're not single casks, because as I said earlier, we don't just release one cask. We don't mature it. Oh, that's really tastes really good and sell it. We blend and blend and blend and then blend again. So even if at 300 bottles, there could have been potentially 20 different casks that combine to create that over its lifespan. Sorry, sounds very complicated.
No, I love it. I'm loving the geekiness, the detail.
Well, I could go into so much more detail, but obviously I'm aware of time.
I know. It's so upsetting. I cannot believe how time has run away with us. But yes, any closing remarks?
Yeah, just closing remarks. So later this year, we've got plenty of exciting releases coming. Later in the next month or two, I can't say exactly when, but in the next month or two, we've got another Whiskey Maker's Edition release, and then in late April is when we've got Whiskey Maker's Reserve number 5 available. So
it's a lie in wait for April, basically. Are we all good?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, some of the editions, as I said, are very exciting, but they're gone very, very quickly. So it's kind of like, if you see one, kind of buy it immediately. Yeah.
Fastest finger first, for sure. So before we bring in Gergo, who is with an animal, who I need the animal to stay, please, for this last bit, and Andy, we bring him back. I just want to bring a couple more little more comments. So your Uncle Vanya, which is really interesting, because I feel like English whiskey is really coming into its own right now. And they are saying, I feel you, making space for this one. My Scottish boyfriend won't be happy with yet another English whiskey, but might let it pass since Scottish malts are involved. Exactly. It's one for everyone going on here. David Stanton's commenting on the value, would have thought it'd been over £50. And then I love this one. Where was it? Mike Pizarro, I need to serve it with some sponge pudding and custard. Perfect. Yes, indeed. So on that note, all of the love. I'm going to bring back Gergio and Andrew.
Hello.
And there's an animal.
Bacon has decided to join us in the meantime.
Is this Bacon, did you say?
This is Bacon. Yeah, Bacon, say hi to everyone.
Hi, Bacon. Oh my gosh, I love it when a cat comes to join Pour and Sip. It's my favourite.
Bacon,
how are you guys doing?
Much like Four Roses, Bacon is an American import.
Oh, Bacon is saying bye now.
We got him over from New York. No, he's not. He's just looking at the camera. We got him over from New York. It's been quite a journey.
No.
Wow.
I love
Bacon, say hi to everyone.
Oh, hi. I love this. I'm such an animal lover. I want everyone to send Pour and Sip pictures of their pets, basically, is what we'll take from this, because I do love to see them. So, Andy, you had a question which came in, which I'm going to get you to loop back on. But just before we get to that, I'm very aware of time. We need everyone's favourite dram of the night, don't we? It's very
We
important.
will. Quick, fastest fingers first. Which was your favourite dram of tonight? I'm going to post it into our group chat because I actually forgot it, and I remember I copy and pasted it from it's lost.
You copied and pasted it. Let me see.
Okay.
What recipe is used for the single barrel, and does it change for different batches?
So the mash bill is always the high rye mash bill. So it's always the 60 corn, 35 rye, and 5 malted barley. And it is always the delicate fruit yeast. So it's always the same on the export market. It is always the same recipe. It doesn't change for different batches. In the US, with the barrel picks, you can get different combinations, but on the export market in Europe, it's always the same recipe.
Excellent.
There you have it.
I'm going to ask Chris very quickly while everyone's votes are coming in. At the Lakes, obviously you're not a Scotch distillery, so you're not, not beholden by the same rules. Have you done any experimenting with mash bills? Would you ever?
Good question. We get asked this quite a lot in terms of would we differ from kind of effectively the Scotch Malt Whisky Society rules? No. We very much we actually believe at some point that maybe the English whiskey as a category might actually become defined very much like Scotch. Maybe, we are always constantly thinking not just 2 years ahead or 5 or 10, we're thinking 30 or 40 years ahead. We want to be kind of pioneer in the English whiskey category. And we believe that people buy into what Scotch is all about and the kind of the heritage and the tradition. So we very much pay tribute to that by only doing what, the association sort of suggests and allows. So we don't experiment with unusual or different casks outside of the rules.
I like it. Interesting. Andy, have you been keeping count of the votes that are coming in?
I have, and there's a lot of votes.
A lot of votes. My goodness. People have opinions.
I'm aware of time, so I'm going to read these like that. Very, very snappy. Panda Bear, Lakes is the winner tonight. Your Uncle Vanya, High Bacon.
High Bacon. Bacon's getting a lot of love, by the way, which is also
Hammering Sandwich, Hibiki, the best for him tonight. Mike Pizarro, Hey Bacon. So, Bacon has really stolen the show.
Bacon is the drama of the
night. David Walcock, Lakes for him. Stuart McGregor, Hibiki for me tonight. All good, but just edged it. Ian WT, Lakes for me. El Sutton, Lakes. Chris Dagnan, Hibiki. Mark Hartle, Four Roses. Ian Turner, Christy, how high is your bed? Princess and the Pea.
I love that comment. Of course it's a Princess and the Pea vibes, please.
I don't even know what that is. But anyway, Joe, good thing it was... Okay, well, I don't know what Princess and the Pea is. You know what Star Wars is. Okay, it's
fine. Mine's like a classic fairy tale that you don't know. Because it's Star Wars be a classic fairy tale? That's not thinking about Scab.
Essentially is. Joe, good thing it was payday last week. Think I need to buy all 3. That's the right answer, Joe. Sean McCarrick, Hibiki, my favourite tonight. Cooper, Four Roses, Green Tears Green, The Lakes, David Stanton, Lakes for me tonight, Gerald McNeely, Hibiki, Anthony Mullins, Hibiki for me, which was a surprise, Dan S, Four Roses, Ian Jambo Rain, Lakes #1, not overly keen on the other 2, interesting, Ian, from a regular, Jonathan B, The One, Jammy, I don't know if he means that was a jammy win for The One or it was jammy in general, just as a note.
Could be both.
I'll take either.
Neil Bolton, Four Roses. Simon Hibiki, Alistair Taff, close call all round, but I think Four Roses for me tonight. Ian WT, Lakes. Really sorry if I don't pronounce this right. Donation Chenu, Four Roses. Steve Howdy Doody, Four Roses. With a surname like Howdy Doody, if that's your surname, it has to be Four Roses. It has to be the American whiskey, surely. Your Uncle Vanya, The One for him tonight. Helena Cassidy, Four Roses. There's so many. We've got so many comments tonight.
So many comments. As a brief aside, going back to Star Wars, my girlfriend whose bed this is has just messaged saying Star Wars is a classic fairy tale.
There you go.
It is though.
You've got time tonight. You need to do the marathon, but don't start from number 1, obviously. Your Uncle Vanya, the one was the one for me tonight. Real Boinga, favourite dram, The One Moscatel cask finish. Chris Randall, Four Roses, but closely followed by The One. Mike Pizarro just headed back to the Lakes, still amazing. I'm going to the Lakes. Hibiki Roses, but I would happily drink any of them. P. Burrett, Lakes for me. I'm nearly finished. Lakes is the best for me. Colin Bell, I'd buy all 4 as also different and amazing. Right answer. That really is very true in today's lineup. all completely different and all very unique in their own ways and all great in their own ways. Dan S, 4 Roses. The Cask lad, the Lake. Stuart piling 4 Roses. And I know I'm not a big fan of bourbon usually. Another question here: what's the difference between bourbon and bourbon whiskey?
I mean, is this semantics? Is there a difference?
I think there's American whiskey and then bourbon. No?
Yeah, there's American whiskey, which is whiskey made in the mainland US or America, and then you have bourbon. The main difference is bourbon will always have at least 51% corn in its mash bill. It has certain aging rules. It has a certain ABV that you can distill to, a certain ABV that you can barrel at. But in terms of bourbon and bourbon whiskey, I mean, one of them's a delicious chocolate biscuit and the other is whiskey. But outside of that, there's not a lot I can think of in terms of difference.
I think so as well. David Stanton, need to visit the Lakes Distillery. Sounds great. Klepto Marcus, the one stole it for him at the end. Colin Bathgate, 4 Roses. Barry Cullen, 4 Roses was my favourite of the night for the Hibiki for a second. Bruce Edwards, 4 Roses tonight. Lake's definitely on my list. Neil Bolton, Hibiki is nice, but why pay over £60 when the other 2 taste fab and are less than £40 each? We'll just buy 4 Roses and the one. Very true. There is that point. And like I was saying earlier to Gergo about the price point of that 4 Roses single barrel, which also has a lovely bottle, I have to say as well. And in general, but I mean, it's just what you fancy. I mean, the Hibiki definitely has the fancier bottle. We all know this, but it's whatever you want to pay for and whatever your palate will, lets you afford, let's say, and your wallet, obviously. Graham Lloyd Jones, buy them all. Whiskey is what money is for. Yes.
Love that approach.
Great tasting. Thanks for and set. Yeah, Stuart McGregor, Alex Chapman. Wow, you have to start from number 1. Exactly. Donation canoe, first tasting. Obviously you have to start from number. Well, let's not get into this really, but obviously the prequels are definitely not as good. Cameron Candlish, great tasting again, guys. Thank you. Green Tea is Green. Excellent session tonight. And I think with that, I'm not going to read any more comments.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing, and I think the whiskies have been fabulous. There is a Star Wars debate to be had, which we'll put a pin in for now.
There's no debate though, which is the best Star Wars film, as we all know it's The Empire Strikes Back, and nobody will disagree with that. But anyway, carry on.
I cannot possibly comment, but there are knowing nods from our fabulous guests.
Yes, yes, and there's Grogu himself, held by Gergo.
I love
Thank you.
I love it. But yes, but I think what we really need to say is a huge thank you to everyone. This has been so much fun. We've had 3 incredible drams. Thank you to our guests. It's been an absolute joy. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you for sharing your tasting notes, your thoughts, your questions. It's been an absolute riot of an evening.
And we'll see you on the
17th, 2 weeks
17th.
today.
Yeah.
Mark the diaries. Be there, be square. We've got 2 other drams to go. So if you can resist them, please do. We'll be back at 7:30 then.
Yeah. See you later, guys.